Washington Post published this story, and the headline is, a majority of the people arrested for a Capitol riot had a history of financial trouble. Wow, you don't say. You know, as the riot was happening, we were saying at this show, I wonder if this would be this much unrest in the country if those people just had gotten their third $2,000 check. And then people made fun of me for saying that. Like, oh, yeah, that's what this is about, $2,000 checks. Well, here's the Washington Post, owned by the world's Jeff Bezos, is telling us that the people who were there were in financial trouble. Trail of bankruptcies, tax problems, bad debts raises questions for researchers trying to understand motivations for the attack. I said that about the riots in the summer, too. Or not the riots, but the protests. In the summer, I said, do you think those people would be out there risking COVID if they just received their second $2,000 check? Because they would feel that the government is somebody's actually trying to help them. Someone actually is looking out for them. I said, if they gave everybody health care and a $2,000 UBI during the pandemic, do you think there would be people protesting? My theory is they wouldn't have been. I could be wrong, but that seems to be what the Washington Post is getting at here. That seems to be what the Washington Post is getting at, what we were saying all along. And a year from now, I have a prediction for the Washington Post. I'm not great at predictions, but here's my prediction. A year from now, the headline on the Washington Post is going to be groundbreaking analysis. Most Americans are struggling financially. That's what it's going to be a year, not now, in a year, that they're going to have a breakthrough headline. The headline should be the Washington Post just figured out why Trump was elected in 2016. That should be the headline. Desperate people cling to demagogues. Desperate people cling to. So here's a little bit from this. Now, Max, you were there, so I just want to read a little bit, and then you can jump in whatever you want. Nearly 60% of the people facing charges related to the Capitol riot showed signs of prior money troubles, including bankruptcies, notices of evictions or foreclosures, bad debts, or unpaid taxes over the past 2 decades, according to an analysis of public records for 125 defendants with sufficient information to detail their financial histories. The group's bankruptcy rate was nearly twice as high as that of the American public. A quarter of them had been sued for money owed to a creditor, and 1 in 5 of them faced losing their home at one point, according to court filings. The financial problems are revealing because they offer potential clues for understanding why so many Trump supporters, many with professional careers and few with violent criminal histories, were willing to participate in an attack egged on by the president's rhetoric, painting him and his supporters as undeserving victims. How tone deaf could you be? We need potential clues as to why people would cling to a con man like Trump. I wonder if it's because they're desperate. Maybe 40 years of failed neoliberalism. We might be onto something there. I mean, this is a little bit more. While no single factor explains why someone decided to join in, experts say Donald Trump and his brand of grievance politics tapped into something that resonated with the hundreds of people who descended on the Capitol in a historic burst of violence. By the way, it might not surprise these people that this paper is owned by someone who's about to become a trillionaire. In 2011, a study found household income was not a factor in whether a young person supported extreme far-right in Germany, but a highly significant predictor was whether they had lived through a parent's unemployment. Going through a bankruptcy or falling behind on taxes, even years earlier, could provoke a similar response. They know it can be lost. They have that history. And then someone comes along and tells you this election has been stolen, says Cynthia Miller Edris, a political science professor, said, and it taps into the same thing. So they're making the Washington Post is making the correlation between people having hard economic times or even their parents and them being right-wing, being attracted to extreme right-wing stuff. Just as everyone's always said. And just so you know, a California man filed for bankruptcy 1 week before allegedly joining the attack on the Capitol. A Texas man was charged with entering the Capitol 1 month after his company was slapped with a $2,000 state tax lien, and several young people charged in the attack came from families with histories of financial duress. Now, that's the Washington Post saying that. That's not me saying that. That's not Max. That's not some Jill Stein or some lefty or a socialist newspaper. That's the newspaper owned by a guy who's going to be a trillionaire. That's who's saying that. And so why do you think people are upset and they don't feel like their government's taking care of them? Because this is how the rest of the world is taking care of their workers during COVID lockdowns. How are they? Because as I say over and over on the show, this isn't happening in any other Western country. I mean, them not giving us a UBI and paying, if they close your business down, they'll pay your salary. In Germany, 87% of your salary is paid for the duration of COVID. In Sweden, 90%. Singapore, you get $422 per adult for the duration. $2,000 a month in Canada. Canada, they already have Medicare for all, and now they get a $2,000 UBI. And now you know why everybody's nicer up there. South Korea, 70% of wages. Japan, $950 a month for the duration of the COVID. Australia, $750 a month to the low-income earners for the duration. Nigeria gives you money. UK, 85% of your wages are being paid for the duration. Netherlands, 90%. The USA, nothing.
And those countries have healthcare.
And these countries have healthcare, by the way. The United States, the richest country of all of them, giving their people nothing and no healthcare. Here's from the Gravel Institute, the number of citizens who lost healthcare coverage since the pandemic began. 14 million in the United States, 0 in the rest of the world. So, and then you have Nancy Pelosi saying she's backing an even smaller stimulus because Biden won. So we're going to give you even less. They're going the other way. And then, of course, what does that lead you to? Thousands of cars form lines to collect food in Texas. Thousands. That's a food line. These are food lines. 1.2 million workers filed for unemployment amid COVID-19 spikes, pushing the total in crisis above 55 million. And then, of course, Congress heads home for Thanksgiving without giving anybody any relief. And that's what they were given this whole year, $1,200. That's what the government gave people this whole goddamn year. By the way, Trump was calling for $2,000 stimulus checks, and our Blue House could only cough up $600. So that was Trump was calling for $2,000. Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer were pushing $600 until Trump came in and said $2,000. And $1,200 was already a joke. $600 is begging for riots. That was December 17th, tweeted by Dylan Cook. And then we got the riots. So let me bring in Max. So Max, just what is your response to this article? Because it seems like it's news to everybody at the Washington Post that people are in desperate financial times. Their government has turned their back on them, and that leads you to right-wing demagoguery. We've known this my whole life, yet everyone's pretending that they don't. Max, what do you have to say?
I mostly agree with that take. And, you know, it was interesting to browse around Twitter and look at the responses to that article, especially the ones that kind of made it through the algorithm. And they were these rich, liberal personalities with blue check marks who were really upset by this article because it contravened their narrative, which was that this was simply about race and racism. And I can tell you, I saw racists and racism at the Capitol for sure. there were members of white nationalist groups there who were present, like the Matthew Heimbach from the Traditional Workers was there. I mean, this was someone who had been a neo-Nazi over the years. I mean, they were there. I saw people call black police officers monkeys, but there were also lots of families there who were coming from the exurbs and rural areas, and they were facing these kind of economic conditions and playing out their anti-system, anti-establishment rage through a fake social rebellion leading them to nowhere. And, I also was struck by how many black and brown people there were there. I mean, there were not a lot. They were very much in the minority, but they were there. And they had been taken in by Trumpism for whatever reason. It is a significant phenomenon that needs to be acknowledged. Race was a factor, but what I think these liberals, like wealthy liberals, people like Joy Reid, who just like go out and basically lie for a living and get millions of dollars, who are upset about this article. I saw David Cross, he's a comedian. I used to think he was funny after 9/11, but his response to the article was just, this was irresponsible. He's like one of those comedians who became unfunny in the Trump era. Like Trump was just like too crazy for them to mock, like Colbert and these characters who just become these boring whiners. But I don't know, maybe David Cross still is funny, but his response was, this was irresponsible to publish. It was irresponsible to merely state these facts. And I thought maybe he could have mustered a funny joke like, these people are all in debt. Maybe they shouldn't have paid for such expensive tactical gear. But the issue is that you should really have Tom Frank on to talk about this, because this is really what he's been writing about for years. The issue is that many of the people who came to the Capitol came from deindustrialized regions and areas and places where the economy is just gone to crap, and they're angry at the system, and they've been led astray and hoodwinked and bamboozled by a right-wing demagogue, as they have for decades. Tom Frank's book, What's the Matter with Kansas, is the best book on this phenomenon, where he goes around Kansas, his home state. I mean, he's from Lawrence, I think, which is like the college town. But he goes around Kansas and tries to understand why this state abandoned its sort of radical tradition, and why the liberal Republican wing got destroyed, and why far-right figures like Sam Brownback, who really fueled, they were like the predecessor to the MAGA movement. The Christian right, why did the Christian right get so strong in Kansas? And he showed that as people's economic conditions declined and the factories went away and their jobs were outsourced, instead of turning to the classic heartland populism that defined Kansas politics for hundreds of years, they turned to the Christian right and got into anti-abortion politics. And these wedge issues were funded by who are Kansas's most prolific oligarchs, the Koch brothers. The billionaire class was funding wedge issues, and they funded white nationalism as well to distract people. So you can imagine all the anger I saw on display, to just directly take cops down, to storm into the Capitol. If that anger was not this misdirected, mindless, directionless, agenda-free insanity about a stolen election, and was about actually gaining something in terms of material change from their government, that would have been revolutionary. And many people from the left would have joined them. It wouldn't have been what it was. But that's not what's happening. That's not what's happening in this country. That's not the mentality on display from the liberals heaping scorn on this article. I think the proper response to this article is that, yes, these are people who are experiencing economic pain simply because they're Americans. And where I live in a black neighborhood in Washington, D.C. that's being gentrified out of existence. I grew up in this city, and everybody's experiencing the same economic pain here, but their politics are completely different. Everybody's in debt. The repo man's showing up down the street and towing people's cars away. People's furniture, you see it out on the street, they're being evicted. Imagine if they could get together with people who participated in this idiotic stop the steal over this common issue of being driven into debt by a capitalist system, it would be truly revolutionary. And that's the issue as I see it. And just one more point about what I saw on display at that rally, this fake social rebellion at the Capitol, driven by a billionaire, an oligarch, Donald Trump. Anti-communism was in the air. More than racial resentment, more than people using racial terms of abuse, I would hear them call the cops communists who sought to get in their way. That was the first thing that people would say, you commie, or they would say, you're under the control of the Chinese CCP. China controls you. Anti-China hysteria. Just like the Russiagate hysteria I heard from Democrats in 2017, I heard there. And that's also very useful. Anti-communism is like the American national religion, and it's designed to lead people away from true revolutionary solutions and movements that aim to change their material conditions. And we haven't seen this level of anti-communism in my generation because the Soviet Union fell in 1991. But why did we have a New Deal in the 1930s? It was because Franklin Roosevelt was afraid of a communist revolution and the threat of a good example of the Soviet Union actually giving workers things. So he said, we have to have a social democracy. We have to give people things. Truman doing the infrastructure projects, LBJ doing the Great Society and creating community colleges. It all started to end as the Soviet Union and the threat of communism began to collapse. And then when did all the jobs go away in the heartland? When did it become deindustrialized? When did our billionaire and millionaire class begin outsourcing everyone? Immediately in the 1990s, at the so-called end of history, after the Soviet Union collapsed. Well, we're in a unipolar world. We can do whatever we want. The capitalist technocracy will take over. But now, American empire is beginning to recede. It's in a state of decline, and there is a country that is rising and that threatens to be that poses the greatest threat to American hegemony since the height of the Cold War. And that country is China. And for all you hear about China in the media, all the human rights deceptions, China has an anti-poverty, a poverty alleviation program, which has been extremely successful. And under Xi, China has wiped out extreme poverty. It's been wiped out. So PBS actually produced a documentary documenting China's poverty alleviation program. An American reporter and China expert went over and showed how villages that were just mired in poverty for years were being transformed, and people were being moved for free into free housing and into jobs and given vocational training. And PBS, under pressure from right-wing media, was forced to pull that documentary. You can't find it anywhere now. And it's just that's the real threat that China poses. So beware of anyone who is spouting anti-China propaganda, because they're playing into this dynamic. And I think the international situation that is taking shape here poses a great threat to the American oligarchy because of the threat of another economic model challenging this failed American one.
Yeah, so I mean that's why we immediately overthrew any socialist government in our hemisphere, is because we can't have a good example of how socialism actually works for everybody. So we got to get rid of that, have the capitalists come in, exploit everything, and create a two-tiered society. So
and call it a failure.
Yeah, that's right, and then call it a failure. So I haven't been on social media. I've been trying to stay off social media as the recommendation of my therapist. And so I've been saying, I actually took the Twitter off my homepage and I put it into another thing on my phone so I can't see it when I look at my phone. And so anyway, so I didn't know that. I thought everybody was going to read this article and go, oh, of course. But that's not. And you were talking about David Cross, the comedian, to me from Mr. Show, that David Cross?
Yeah, I think so.
That guy's funny.
Unless it was another David Cross. his response definitely came up.
I thought David Cross was like a Bernie bro, and I thought he was like a lefty, Bernie's supporter. But everybody gets sucked into that that Russiagate stuff, Max. That's what I think. Even guys like that, they get sucked into the. I mean, look at all of them at Conan, at Colbert and Conan and Andy Richter, and they all. Everybody's. They're all fucking Russiagators, right? So,
I mean, yeah. If you're a comedian and you are on the side of the establishment,
I know
you're not funny anymore. You're just not funny. And those guys, they don't realize the only reason they have these shows and these jobs is because they're manufacturing consent behind the guise of comedy. And they're just running on fumes and the echoes of the jokes they once told back when like Andy Richter and Conan were doing in the year 2000. But like it's the year 2021 and this guy is like just this condescending bore. Or Colbert crying on January 6th. I mean, that event was so filled with comedy and so there were so many things that could have been said about it. Have you ever watched Trevor Noah? I watched it. I like suffered through it. I was feeling masochistic. It was like, it's like the most unfunny. I mean, how is this not career suicide? He's one of the highest paid comedians in the country.
It's as if comedy was being produced by the government.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
That's what it seems like. It's when I watch the Daily Show now with Trevor Noah, it's literally as if the DNC was producing a comedy show. That's what it seems like.
They're literal court jesters. I mean, or Eminem. I mean, what the hell happened to this guy? I thought he was like, you know, the new Lenny Bruce, and then he comes out during the BET Awards, and it's like he does this freestyle that might have been written by like James Carville and a bunch of DNC consultants. And it's like the first words of it are, I mean, besides that, and then, you know, your comedy gets bad. If you start to embrace this mentality, your rhymes get really bad too. The first lines were, "That's an awfully hot coffee pot." That was the first line. Should I drop it on Donald Trump? Probably not. Like, what happened to Eminem? I mean, just quit.
It really ruined a lot of comedians. Donald Trump ruined a lot of news people, ruined a lot of comedians. It broke late night television. I mean, late night television is a joke. I mean, yeah, Stephen Colbert weeping about Donald Trump saying something about the election. It was just he's just a. And then him sitting there, and then a week later he's with Barack Obama. And he's like, "I just want to drink you in." Oh my God! You know he's a war criminal. He had a kill list. You know that Barack Obama had a kill list. Literally had a kill list, and he killed a 16-year-old kid on purpose. And then he joked about it. You know this, right? Yeah. Let me drink
Larry
you
Wilmore actually had a good joke about that.
What was it?
You remember that?
No.
He said, you know, Barack Obama's like Steph Curry, likes dropping bombs from long range or something. It was at the last White House press correspondence dinner with Obama, and Obama was not happy with that joke. And we never heard. I mean, Larry Wilmore's show wasn't that good, but we never heard from him again.
Oh, you think he pissed him off with that joke?
Look at Obama's expression. Watch Larry Wilmore took it to Obama. I mean, it was
good for Larry Wilmore. Good for I didn't see that. How did I miss that?
I don't know.
Good for Larry Wilmore. Okay, I didn't know that. And that you're right, he's gone. I haven't seen hide nor hair of him since then.
I mean, can you imagine what would happen if anyone made a joke about Michelle Obama? Like any one of these comedians, they'd be disappeared. I mean, this is like royalty you cannot touch.
Hey, everybody, this is the part where I tell you where all our live shows are, but there aren't any. And then this is why I tell you to join our premium program and get extra content, but nobody's got a fucking job. So just enjoy the video.